Hi everyone! Season 29 is going to change the way that we play the game significantly. Namely, there is a paragon cap in place, so we don't just farm experience all the time and try to get our loot on the way, but instead you're going to farm gear as a main activity. This is actually a massive shift in how you approach the game, and in this video I want to show you how to do that most effectively. In particular, using the Kanai's cube. There are a few recipes in here that help you out, and I want to tell you how you use them, what is the strategy behind them, so that you don't waste your materials and get your character done in the fastest way possible. Now, one recent addition to the game is the page 11, the Curiosity of Lorafnar recipe, that maybe most of you actually don't even know yet. This was added in Season 28, so if you have not played the recent season, then you don't know this, but it allows you to make one item into a guaranteed primal. So you can see this here right now. I have one of these equipped. This is this different red shade here that you can see, and it has the primal stats. Everything is maxed out, and it looks a bit different from a regular primal here. You have this red outline versus here the other red shade basically, and you can have one of these equipped at a time. And you need to use primordial ashes to make one of these with the cube. How do you get primordial ashes? Well, you just establish other primals. So when you find useless primals that you don't want, you can get 55 of those ashes. So this means it's like a 2-to-1 trade roughly. So you just need to find 2 useless primals and you have like a guaranteed primal weapon or maybe any other piece that you're trying to get. The good thing about making an item primal is that all of the ranges are maxed out. And this is especially important for items that have really large multipliers and those that are very hard to get. So this usually includes weapons of any kind, because most of them have like these big multipliers, and you also want to get a high weapon damage range, etc. So this is definitely a prime choice, but you can also go for other items, especially rings in most cases. Something like a convention of elements is kind of the same story with the multiplier, or those class specific rings, let's say a Band of Might or Halo of Karini. Those are extremely important to max out, because those damage reduction mods are usually very impactful, especially if they are perfect versus, slightly imperfect. That can make a huge difference. So those are the main candidates here to max out. But the thing is, you don't really necessarily find that many primals to just roll those over and over. Only if you play quite a lot, you will get those primordial ashes frequently, and then you can just try to craft the perfect primal. But it can be a really nice boost early on already. When you do a greater of 70, you get your guaranteed primal item, you get guaranteed Black Thorns boots, and you already have one of the 2 that you need to make, for example, your weapon primal and get a nice power spike very early on. Just having a primal weapon versus not having a primal weapon in the early game is already a pretty significant upgrade. And then you can try to min-max the stats a little bit later on. But the thing is that you don't want to just go for this guaranteed primal. You also want to combine this with the other mechanics that you have available to you. So especially the upgrade rare and the reforge. So upgrade rare is usually something that you can use very early on. So this allows you to just take yellow items, make them into legendary. So for example here the spear, and you can try to gather the most important multipliers for your build. You can try to gather your set pieces and just get going with your setup without really trying to get the perfect best in slot gear. The thing is that upgrade rare, you can only do it so much because eventually you're going to run out of those materials, and it's also a relatively slow process. You have to upgrade these items one by one, and then there's depending on the item type, 10 or 20 items in the item pool, and you don't really have this targeted crafting that you want. So this is kind of a backup option, but if you just end up with tons of those materials, it can be really nice to just for example, upgrade rings, and you can get a bunch of different rings for many different builds. There's Focus and Restraint, there's Convention of Elements, Unity, and maybe class-specific rings. So I like to do that a lot when I have leftover materials, just to try my luck and see if I get something really good. Because also for the rings, it usually doesn't matter too much if they are ancient or not. So this is also quite helpful here to just get trying to get a good roll on these. Or you can also use upgrade rare items for very specific builds for very specific slots. One example here is this Raker Barb that I have logged into right now. if you upgrade spears on a barb, there are only 3 different options. And this build in particular is the best barbarian build, and it uses 2 of those spears at a time. So you have a 2 in 3 chance to get the spear that you want. So if you upgrade this, you're probably going to get one of those that we just have here. And this is a very effective way to actually try to get a good roll, because if there's only 3 items in the pool, you have really good chances. And not only that, but in this case, for example, you can also just try to get one of them with a good roll. So for example here, this is exactly what happened. You know, this has a decent roll, almost maxed out on a multiplier, etc. And, well, then you have the guaranteed primal to get the second weapon. So you can basically try to use, for example, the upgrade rare or the reforge first, and then make primal whatever is left. So making an item primal is a really good way to kind of like even out the odds a little bit and try to get the item that is like the most elusive for your setup. So while early on, for example, you want to make like your weapon primal just to get like this power spike, eventually you're probably going to find a decent ancient weapon anyway. And you can save that up and maybe make another item primal that you just can't get, like I mentioned with those rings, for example, or maybe even like a Squirt's necklace amulet. You might just not find a really good like elemental crit roll, and then making it primal might be a good option as well. So you can always use this tool later to try to get the hardest to get piece for your setup actually. So this smooths out the progression curve, smooths out the RNG, and it's a really great tool later on to just like get the last missing piece for your setup. And then of course we have Reforge Legendaries. So Reforge Legendaries is usually used after you have gathered most of your setup, after you have grinded for a while. So for example, some pieces are just easy to find, especially set pieces. For most sets you can just gamble them quite easily, eventually get an ancient piece, and you basically set up, or maybe you need like 2 or 3 copies of an ancient piece to have something really good. But for the most part, they are quite easy to gather, and this is not something you want to reforge. Reforge is something that you also use for like the more elusive pieces. Again, for example, for those weapons, for those rings, maybe for something like a bracer, etc. So those items are not that easy to get, and Reforge can really help you out to just get something really strong here. The problem with Reforge though is it is very costly. So not only do you need bounty mats for that, but you also need 50 forgotten souls. So you cannot really just reforge all day long, even if you farm bounties a lot. Or in Season 29, there's the Visions of Enmity mechanic where you get tons of bounty mats. So the main bottleneck for reforging are the forgotten souls. And you get them most effectively from just like blasting through those speed greater rifts, especially greater rift 90s. If you complete them really fast, you can farm 300, 400, even up to 500 forgotten souls an hour. But this is about it. So you get like something like half to 1 ancient piece of your choosing, so to say, with Reforge per hour, which is not a very terrible ratio, but it can still take a while, because in some cases you need like many rolls of, you know, trying to get an ancient and then trying to get the right rolls on it. Even if you just get an ancient weapon here, for example, you know, the multiplier on the secondary might just roll, you know, 150 or 160 or something like that. And only like maybe 1/5 of the time or 1/10 of the time that it rolls ancient, it also rolls a really good multiplier, and then still come the weapon range and the stats, etc. So some of those pieces may require like 10 or 20 or even 30 attempts of an ancient piece to actually roll to, you know, a high degree of perfection that is actually useful for like a high-end push, for example. So this means Reforged Legendary will really consume your Forgotten Souls, and you have to be quite strategic about when to use it and on what item. Essentially, the way that I approach reforging legendaries is that I always wait as long as possible before using this feature. So this means that for example, I start a season and I grind, you know, for like 20 hours, 30 hours, 50 hours with my character. I try to like really min-max most of my gear. Like, let's say you have 13 slots and maybe 10 or 11 of them are, you know, near perfect from just the loot that I gathered from gambling at Kadala. Like I mentioned, those set pieces are easy to get. Sometimes you have some crafted pieces here. So it's quite easy to get some of those pieces, and then you have those more elusive ones. And basically by the time I decide, okay, I'm nearly done, now I want to do my solo push, this is the time when I start reforging like a madman. I go farm bounties, and I start making like my really big weapon, I start making a big ring, and then you can make the last item into a primal, whatever is missing. And this is how you make sure that you don't accidentally waste your Forgotten Souls. And for example, you might reforge a really strong weapon, but then a day later you just drop one randomly. So you don't really want that to happen and have wasted like thousands of Forgotten Souls. This is why I do it rather late. I just try to like get something very early on that just works, you know, something acceptable. And then once I start the push, this is the time to craft all the items with the perfect stats. Good news though, in Season 29, those bounty materials are much easier to gather than usual. So with the Visions of Enmity mechanic, you can just go around in adventure mode, basically on your way to another bounty or just like farming a specific zone. You get those portals, you go through there, and once you finish that, you get 40 of each of those bounty mats. So this is the equivalent of 400 Forgotten Souls. So yeah, on a really high pace, this is like an hour of Greater Rift blasting. And for most people, probably even longer than that. So you don't even have to do that many of those Visions of Enmities or that many bounties, because you just get those bounty mats so quickly in Season 29 from the season mechanic. So this means you have to put a large focus on actually gathering as many Forgotten Souls as possible, just blasting through those speed Greater Rifts, and then you do a little bit of the season mechanic for the bounty mats. As a rule of thumb, playing very fast and efficiently usually allows you to finish up your character in somewhere like around 30 to 50 hours or so, with like near perfect gear in every slot. That obviously depends a bit on like the degree of perfection that you're looking for, but let's say, you know, something like 95% perfect versus 99% perfect. So of course you can like min-max it a little bit, you know, further and further. You can try to farm up more primals, but it usually doesn't matter too much. Usually you just want to get like those decent ancient pieces. You want to have the right stats in the right places, and then if they're like slightly suboptimal, it's not really such a big loss. So, but in Season 29, it's actually going to be much faster, because you get those bounty mats so much quicker, because you have this guaranteed primal, and also because main stat is going to be so much more valuable. Usually what happens when you play a season is that you try to roll off main stat in many slots. Like the rings, okay, that happens anyway, but for example the gloves, many builds go for like the so-called quad factor, where you have crit, and then maybe cooldown area or area attack speed, and actually no main stat on your glove. And similar for the weapons, eventually people start rolling off the main stat on the weapons to get like an attack speed roll or something like that, because it just becomes better and better at higher paragons, where you get more and more main stat just from leveling up. But in Season 29 this is not the case, and main stat on your items is usually something that appears naturally and actually a desired stat with a low paragon character. So in general, gearing up in Season 29 is going to be very fast, and if you follow those guidelines that I just gave you with the cube, with, you know, being a bit careful about where to spend your mats and on what and at which point in the progression, you will be gearing up in no time yourself as well. So that's it for this guide here, just a quick refresher on how to gear up most efficiently. Hope this helps you. I wish you good luck in Season 29, and see you guys next time.